In the last couple of days or weeks even, I was contemplating this idea of how the market could regulate, not just regulate, but also eliminate the exploitation of humans through what now is known as human trafficking. So I define human trafficking as anything related to the selling and coercion of humans into actions that they do not want to perform, but are forced to by basically corrupt, immoral, profit-hungry people. Now, there are two forms of these behaviors and these kinds of people who would perform that, as far as I can tell. One would be the plain old psychopath who just wants to abuse children, women, or even men. This ranges from killing them, torturing them, sexually exploiting them, forcing them to work for them, etc., to the basically big companies saving money by exploiting the labor of people they either buy or put into contracts that are basically favoring the company but disfavoring the people through maybe a lawsuit or some other form of violence that is available for the company to use against the people. Why I came to this conclusion is my dabble into deep web and the black market there. The deep web is the internet that you cannot normally go to with your browser, be it Firefox, Chrome, or even Safari Internet Explorer, but you gain there through, like, for example, Tor or something else. I don't want to advertise it. And what you can find there is, well, quite a lot of harmless things, but also very, very dangerous and evil things. Just, I have no other word but evil. And what you, for example, can buy is assassinations, drug, credit card information, personal information, hacked computers, webcams, all sorts of things, and also videos and live streams of, for example, torturing, murdering, and raping people, and those usually fetch a pretty good price. Now, on the deep web, you pay with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is something that has been advertised in the libertarian, when I mean libertarian, I mean the black-yellow libertarian circles. Now, I'm not too familiar with Bitcoin, and I don't want to talk about Bitcoin here, but basically, it's untraceable as far as I can tell, and therefore you can use it to buy things on the black market pretty easily. Now, when libertarians and anarcho-capitalists, or what I could just call them market fundamentalists, advertise the free market, to me that always sounds like a continuum fallacy. What is free? Where do you draw the line? And I would say that, the moment you invoke some kind of self-ownership that you cannot prove, that you just have as a sort of axiom, but it cannot be enforced, right, except through violence. I mean, if someone just enslaves you, what you're going to do, there's nothing you can do, right? If someone holds a gun to your head or captures you, whatever, well, nice moral arguments, but they don't save your life. And so in a market economy or in a market environment, exploiting people for profit is just a market, right? And sexual exploitation is just a market, right? Just because it is now the black market doesn't mean it's not a market. And if you can make money through it, it's okay. And if you have customers, it's okay, right? Demand and supply. People demand deranged shit and you supply them with deranged shit. Now, in what I question is, how could an anarcho-capitalist society, so a society which has no central force like the government, which is funded by taxation, which market fundamentalists call theft, and I don't want to go in there, but just to clear that up, how could in such a society be any kind of regulative form to protect people from these kinds of exploitations? So what I mean, for example, right now, you have police forces, intelligence forces, military, all working together to find these organizations, these criminals, and do their best to fight them. Now, I'm not saying that this is perfect. I'm just saying this exists now. And in a market fundamentalist society, there would be no such thing, right? Because there would be no taxation to pay for this. The only alternative I see would be market alternatives, meaning companies, businesses. But businesses that don't get irregular money from just taxation have to get the money from somewhere else. And that, is just money that people have to pay. Now, let's say you live in Southeast Asia, not particularly the most advanced and rich place in the world. Someone, steals children from the street and forces them into prostitution to make a profit. Who's gonna crack down on that? I mean, the parents? I mean, these children probably lived on the street to begin with. Or make another example. Take a family with 5 or 4 kids, unable to feed them all. Someone comes and gives the family a contract saying, hey, you sell me at least one of your children and I give you a monthly income, but we can do whatever the fuck we want with the child. Sure, any family could say no, but some families might say, yeah, it's better to save 3 or 4 of our children instead of having them all starve or live in absolute despair. Now, these are extreme moral cases, but this is what I'm trying to double in here, extreme moral cases and how an anarcho-capitalist society could deal with these. And because I've done some research, I found a Reddit thread made a month ago, which is basically exactly this question, how human trafficking could be dealt with in Ancapistan, so in an anarcho-capitalist society. And I'm going to just go over some of the answers by anarcho-capitalists and explain why I think this is not, the ultimate deal. So I begin from the bottom, and then I go to the top. So basically the least amazing arguments and then the best arguments. The first one is,
yes, charity. Churches, for one, currently provide some pro bono legal service and other aid. They'd certainly be interested in expanding those services and include DRO charity.
So this is the first argument any libertarian anarcho-capitalist market fundamentalist will go to when it comes to how to deal with bad, immoral things in the world. Charity, right? How to save the poor? Charity. How to save the sick? Charity. It's outside of the market. It's an externality, and it can only be solved with externalities. The market has no answer to these issues. This is why these people always go to charity. But let me just say, okay, charity isn't necessarily bad, but right now we have charity, right? So we have charity plus tax-funded police and military and intelligence agencies, and still this issue affects millions of people worldwide. And it's not even if it's just 1% of the population that is affected by this issue, that's still 1% absolute devastation to people. You have maybe no idea what's going on in the world, but I can tell you the amount of depraved and sick shit going on in the world, exploiting women, children, and men, is just, that's one victim enough. Not enough, but too much. And to rely on charity to solve this issue is just a shit way. It's not an actual issue. It's not solving anything. I don't see how anarcho-capitalism is any better than we have right now when it comes to this issue. And I'm just talking about this issue, right? There are other issues, but I'm talking about this issue. So charity is a cop-out, and you will find this multiple times in this thread. And probably outside of it as well. People always go to charity as if that is the ultimate answer. It's not. It's a part answer, but it's not the ultimate answer, right? You have to have a systems answer to issues, right? Or else the system you're proposing is just bad. It's just not effective enough. So going on, someone says,
it's a basic violation of human rights, so it would be gone after pretty aggressively.
Well, first of all, human rights are a concept. It's a construct. It's upheld by the collective effort of people and the pouring of resources into organizations which uphold them, meaning, for example, the military and other such organizations, or the law, justice system. That means nothing. Appeal to morality is just not enough. And when he says, so it would be gone after pretty aggressively, like by whom? Charity again? He doesn't specify who's going to do anything. So it's a bad argument. Just moving on. Someone says,
just as companies and individuals do pro bono work, it could be possible to convince DRO to take a certain case's pro bono basis. Maybe a whole private investigation industry would pop up and find missing people. The thing is, though, you have to be missed by someone to be missing person. If you have no friends and family, no one knows you're missing. And if you have friends and family, they're likely to chip in the fund to find you.
So the first one who actually answers in the market context, so he says that it would be an industry finding missing people. So this is an actual answer outside of charity, but I think it's still not okay. First of all, that has to be paid for. And I ask myself, what if you cannot pay for it? Now, pro bono. But pro bono is like, how many times are you going to do that? Question is, how many times will this pop up? And is it okay to do pro bono every week, because someone is missing? Will most people actually be able to afford it? But I think even if people could afford it, it's going to be a huge strain on their money. I mean, just imagine. So you have a company which finds missing people. Now, there are two ways missing people can be missed. One, they are missed and local, or they're missed and, well, they're trafficked, right? They're somewhere else now. When it's local, I guess it's relatively cheap. You just have to crack down on the people, bring them down, done. When you have to find them overseas, well, you're done, right? And he brings out people who have no family or friends who cannot pay for this. Well, these people are either fucked, or some nice charitable person funds investigations like overseas, for example, to find these people. In either case, having a company which basically is in the business of violence, which this investigation would be, right? They have to send people with equipment, with weapons in there. This kind of company can and probably will resort to some kind of corrupt behavior eventually. And you will have protection money, like the mafia does it. Let's say you have a company like a business which works in prostitution. They exploit women to sell them on the market. They exploit children to sell them on the market. And you have the local private investigation firm which cracks down on these. They're the biggest. They have the most customers. They have the most money. And well, all these businesses that sell sex, and basically prostitution and exploitation have to do is give those companies a monthly fee, saying, here, we give you this amount of money, which is much more than anyone else can probably give you on a regular basis. Therefore, help keeping your business afloat. You crack down on the small fishes, but you leave us alone. And any big ring of prostitution is able to do that, or could be able to do that. And any investigation firm, you have to appeal to their morality again. Now, let's say they say, no, we don't do this, we take you down. Well, then you have probably a fight where people kill each other, and it's expensive and a risk. And how many times will a company invest in this risk before they say, this is not worth it? We rather do the easy route to just get money from them, which is, quite frankly, from market logic, makes more sense, right? Oh, we get free money for not doing anything just by leaving them alone? That's amazing. Oh well, we miss out on some contracts, but even those we can exploit. We can say, sure, we do our best to investigation fee, depending on how long and how intensive, cost this amount of money. People say, okay, here I have $500, this is all I can afford, please find my daughter. And they say, sure, we just gonna do that. And $500 wasn't enough, we couldn't put enough resources into it. You can spend another 500 and we can see what we can do. In the meantime, they get 20,000 or something a month just by the prostitution ring. Now, this is completely hypothetical. I understand this is completely sprung out of my mind, but this is a scenario you have to get through your mind in order to talk about this issue. You cannot just think that everyone is going to behave totally moral all the time, especially if the market has no mechanism to justify moral behavior. All it has is justified rational behavior, and rational means rational in the market theory, meaning I do this which keeps my company the best afloat and profitable. And if it's more profitable to collaborate with the criminals, well, that's going to be the way it is. So you have three issues. So first, you have not enough money for individuals to investigate everything. Therefore, these investigation firms are probably only for the rich people. You have the potential of corruption of these firms because they just have to make deals with other companies to work together. They have violence as well, so they can easily exploit people. They don't have to listen to anyone. They sell trained like policemen, basically. How is a policeman in an anarcho-capitalist society more trustworthy than a policeman in a state society? Both use violence. Both have authority with law. Just that this time the law comes from the companies and from other justice firms. The whole justice system in an anarcho-capitalist society, to me, feels relatively wonky. I have no real idea how this is going to work out in the end anyways. I think no one really does. I think everybody is just thinking it's just going to work out somehow. And lastly, well, if people were just missing and no one is caring for them, well, they're fucked. Well, what about those people? Should we just not care about them? Should we just say, well, all those Filipino girls today being exploited for sex is just, well, tragedy, but who cares? Nobody cares about them. No, this is not okay. Moving on, what else? So the next one says,
I imagine the investigation and punishment of human traffickers would be a fairly low-hanging fruit for church and charity.
Well, I don't even have to go further into this. It's church and charity. So one guy says,
it might be possible in Anarcho to save people, capture the bad guys, and seek reimbursement from them in their crimes.
Well, that is a very high risk take. I don't know which company is gonna take down bad guys in the hopes they make profit back from it. And how are they gonna do this anyways? They would just not start going out there and finding people. No, they would probably have some kind of a contractor. I mean, someone has to go there and say, hey, people are missing. And you don't have the state to do that. Don't have a free police where you just call and you say, hey, my dog is missing, my child is missing, my wife is missing, my husband is missing. I mean, you can't do that. Probably these companies would probably say, hey, you can call, but we don't investigate unless you pay for it. And this might be possible. I know it's all hypothetical, but it feels very weaselly and not real concise theory around it. I mean, I don't blame these people, but if you support an ideology so strongly that you call yourself a voluntarist or an anarcho-capitalist, I think you should be able to think about some of these issues more closely. The black market is not just drugs, right? There's more in it. So someone says,
is human trafficking even a relevant thing in Anarcho? After all, there are no national borders in the paradigm.
Well, he doesn't seem to understand what else is in that category. So we just move on. Okay, I just have to read this because it's so stupid.
How would human trafficking be dealt with in a society where people don't even own themselves? An understanding and acceptance of the principle of self-ownership would be the vital first step in reducing slavery scenarios.
Yeah, no. Sorry, but appeal to morality doesn't mean if the system doesn't reference it. Moving on. So someone says,
well, those victims would still have families and friends who might want to find them and bring them back. But the main thing I would say is that Afghanistan would not be perfect. People would still fall through the cracks, probably much less so than today. But most likely, those that slip through the cracks wouldn't be active shit on by the only system that exists.
Well, right now we have someone loses their job. They don't have to starve necessarily if they live in the correct country with the correct social system. If they get sick, they don't live in debt for their entire life. If they want to get education, they don't live in debt their entire life. If they, if someone hurts them, harms them, they can call the police without being afraid of having to pay a massive bill afterwards. I know that many people live here in America. I don't live in America, I live in Europe. So for me, it's not so much an issue as for Americans to live in basically what is already the freest market you can live in. But I'm pretty happy here. So, and the ultimate comment with the highest rating is this.
In an ANCAP society, just because you have not hired a protection firm doesn't mean you're not covered by law.
Well, but law is a company-based system, right? You don't have a national, we don't have any nation, so you don't have a national law. So law is whatever works in the current community, upheld by private laws, basically firms that say that investigate, that do things. I mean, these things are fucking expensive. The law operators right now is fucking expensive. How do you think in a capitalist society where there's no national law this would be done? You would have different laws to different communities even, or you wouldn't have no laws. And the law companies, they have to make money, and the moment they have to make money, they can be easily bribed, they can be easily exploited by people who have enough money to go around. If it's cheaper to pay off the law enforcement with a huge sum of money than to go out of business basically and go to prison, well, you do that, right? So moving on.
You can still go to courts for arbitration. Victims of human trafficking would have tort claims. Since tort claims would be likely to be transferable, persecutors would be looking for victims to buy claims from. They can persecute the claims and collect. Protection firms might free victims of human trafficking from their captors, expecting to collect the fee once the perpetrators are prosecuted. Transferable torts might create better incentives to stop human trafficking than the current system. By creating incentives for people to seek out and help victims in human trafficking for financial gain.
So he thinks that, it would be a big company thing, like, oh, there would be an incentive to help victims because there's financial gain. I can just say the opposite. There's a huge incentive to exploit people because of financial gain. You can play this game in both sides. And he also talks about these so-called tort claims. That's an American thing, so I'm not actually familiar with it. But it's, as far as I understand, it's based on the current justice system. Again, it's the same as I've already said before. Your justice system costs money. You can easily bribe it. You don't have any democracy. You don't have any people overlooking this. Just as you have bribery today in the court systems, you will have bribery in the anarcho capitalist even more, because there's no government overseeing. You will rely again on NGOs. You will rely on, well, not NGOs, but nonprofits. You rely on charity that regulates this. But how the fuck is charity supposed to deal with all these issues? I mean, charity is supposed to take care for the poor, for the sick, for the homeless, for apparently for human trafficking, but also for legal systems, and for to look into if the food is clean, if the water is clean, if the air is clean, if there's no corruption. This is, again, I don't see how the system works and how the market has any good answer to human trafficking, exploitation. As long as there is a market, as long as there is a profit mechanism, human trafficking will happen. If it's profitable, you do it. And it will be profitable. If I have a company and I can save millions of dollars in a year by not employing people, but by just buying slaves on the black market and just keeping them alive at the minimum cost, much cheaper than an actual worker, well, I'm going to do that. And if people eventually find out that I have slaves and they don't buy from me anymore, I mean, that requires so many steps here. First of all, they have to find out. Then they have to have the money to go to a competitor. Then the question is if the competitor isn't doing it either because it's pretty cheap and effective, and I have such a market advantage because I use slave labor to produce. The fact is, I probably will dominate the market relatively quickly unless the other competitors do similar tactics. And small businesses cannot compete with that anyways, because they cannot afford to buy slaves. It's much harder to control the slaves if you're a smaller business, and so on. I mean, sure, you can always say, well, controlling slaves is hard. They can revolt, they can attack. You have to have a military apparatus within your company, some kind of policing system. You have to have the people who do it, because not everyone is a moral piece of shit. Well, morality flies out the window the moment you have deprivation, and you just have to have poor people doing the job, and finding. You can use slaves to control the other slaves. All you have to do is give the slaves that control the other slaves, an incentive, and monetary incentive. You just say, hey, you want to have all these goodies? Well, whenever you have someone revolt, port him. Whenever someone just be a spy for us. These systems work in prison. You will have those. And prison is basically what you would have then in a society, right? You would have slave labor. Well, the prison could even sell those cheap laboring workers to companies. Totally immoral as well. Would be counting as human trafficking. Just because they're criminals doesn't mean they're not humans anymore. And whatever they are, depending on what their criminal record is, doesn't mean they're inherently evil or something. They might have just stolen something or broken a contract or something, and are in prison now. Anyways, to me, it's clear the market has no mechanism to deal with human trafficking, with exploitation of people. It's not just that it cannot deal with it, it's not even within the logic of free market. The free market says everything should be free, therefore it should be free to sell children to sex slavery, men into slavery, and women to prostitution, and of course animals into abuse of any kind, so that sick people can pay good money to have those nice goodies. That's about it. Thank you. If you have any actual argument, if I missed anything, you can tell me. I think about it more. I'm not done with this topic, but I just wanted to express my feelings, my thoughts, and especially addressing the counter arguments that I found online.